intense interaction with each other that at the end of the day, hopefully we can go grab a beer. Times. I won't say how many, but just being able to have that personal connection would be nice to some of the upper discussions.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Thank you, all of you. Really important. Showing up. All these events matter. I did prepare a little something I'm going to read. I wanted to start by saying free speech is essential and our democracy. We can only build on the ideas of open, good faith dialogue with all ideas. Without the freedom to express ourselves and understand the perspective, silencing speech harms every single one. When good ideas are suppressed, society loses the opportunity to grow and improve. When some state can open debate now clarify this, and give that person a chance to review, learn, and evolve. Hopefully, evolve the frame of mind. By upholding the free expression, protect the fair process, by our progress. Silencing open conversation. That's why it's really important to come up here. Senator Johnson said that we're not the same party today, but still good to be safe. I'll give you one thing. I don't know exactly how many times. I'm going to say 17. Just because and it's a prime number, like yes, prime number. But I'm a freshman legislator. One time, I forgot my wallet down in my office. It's going to be like 7 days until I was down there. I'm kind of an old guy, so I'll walk down to Patrick. Cell phone. I called Patrick. Man, got my wallet from me? Like, perfect. This office, before I got to find it. Not because, Stephen Kelly, because somebody on where Republican Democrats took it along. It's some little simple things, right? My philosophy and jazz and don't do this, right? I know it's pretty harsh, but it's a reality down there. There's a lot of people down there cranky and focused on their mental zeitgeist, right? They're cranky to everybody around them, even their own party. Focus on so these sometimes. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being able to carry this forward. Finally, don't be a dick, right? It's good to each other. Thank you,
So, hey everybody, I'm Shawnee Luft. I'm a professor of religion in America. Thanks, by the way, for everybody being here, as well as for setting up this event and actually part of the conversation. What I tell my students on the first day of my religious studies classes, I teach classes in religion in America, I teach classes in Testament, I teach classes on cults of new religions, and religion and media. And what I talk about on the first day is that the skill I'm going to ask them to practice in my course in religious studies is to see the world from the perspective of people that believe things differently than how they believe. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have to agree with what they're studying, but they can also study it without fighting it and insisting that everybody that we study is wrong, no matter what they believe, someone's personal beliefs. I tell my students that what religious studies asks you to do is to bracket your own personal beliefs just in the context of this class in order to be open to understanding perspectives other than our own and worldviews other than your own, and maybe values, morals other than your own. And I think that skill set is important. And I tell my students, we don't have a lot of examples in really vital skill to practice. And if you practice it, it's like a muscle. You get better at it over time. And I think learning to do that, learning to approach other people's perspectives and try to listen to what other people they believe separately from your own beliefs or opinions or politics, I think that's a useful skill for talking to family, for talking to colleagues, people at work. And I sincerely believe it's necessary for society to function. And you can get your wallet back if you lose it. So there's a fourth value I haven't even considered. And so that's where I'm coming from. That's what I talk about. And maybe we can talk about that more tonight. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. I am Donna Warren. In addition to being a member of the Chancellor's Commission on Free Expression and Civil Discourse, I'm also a philosophy professor, and that is definitely the perspective that I bring to this work. I could not agree more with my panelists on this, on sitting with me. I think free speech is obviously, I hope, important. Free speech that engages difference is even more important. And I think that free speech that engages difference is incredibly hard. It's no accident that some of these conversations will come. It's no accident that the fact that you can have beer with someone who disagrees with you is a fact worth mentioning and celebrating. Because it can be hard. Because when people encounter difference, they realize, I think correctly, that their own beliefs and their own perspectives might be under threat in some way. They might have to change their mind, and some of those beliefs might be very important. So I don't want to underestimate that. Nobody does. The difficulty of this work, in addition to the importance of it, and one of the things that I most love about being at an institution of higher learning, maybe WSP in particular, is it gives people the opportunity to cultivate both the will and the skill, because I think without both of those things, it's not going to. We need to intentionally cultivate the will to do the hard thing, to regulate our own emotions, and then the practical skills, because I don't think most people just sort of emerge on the scene into this fluid. But by engaging a variety of courses and intentionally trying to think, how can I do this better? What practical things can I say that might help? I think we can, there's no better place to do that.
Hi everyone. Myself, Dorothy, rather than wax poetic about the importance of First Amendment free speech and all that, I agree with completely. My role as the Dean of Students, as an educator outside of the classroom, is to work with students often who have questions about what others are doing or saying about their speech, or that they're engaging behaviors that might be leaning against the speech of other students by interrupting what they're saying or like that. So Adrian and I actually spent all of June together talking about free speech and bringing your true authentic self and your belief values to our campus. To all of our first year students in June. That's part of the region policy about academic freedom and freedom of expression, something we do. And then in working with students and outside guests for the campus, I often am present at controversial speakers on our campus, helping our students understand why you may disagree with their perspective, that we need to support their opportunity to share it. They will have their own terms of how to operate within, from an educator's perspective, the policy and guidelines of the university, so everyone has a say, so everyone can express what they like to, what they value and what they have to say in a way that is still respectful. So that is the role of your Dean of Students, and that's why I get to sit on that.
Well, time for, I like being last so I can clean up here. So, I think our panelists have kind of outlined everything and kind of things I was going to talk about already been said. But let me back up a moment, because the goal of this forum is for you to ask questions of us. But before we do that, I want to say, first of all, I appreciate that. It's critical that we have this discussion. And the reason we need this discussion, because there has been some blocking time. American history is always been. Let's be clear. America's always had. We will get through this as well. But university is a place where we test ourselves. We push the boundaries. We ask ourselves fundamental questions of how we grew up, how we were brought up in life. And we ask valuable questions about our beliefs. And we challenge those beliefs. Others to ask them questions about their beliefs. The ugliest thing to have in any college campus is a moment that you're sitting, that moment you're in the book, that moment that you're sitting in a pleasant small room. And having a discussion doesn't have to become angry, ugly, violent, physical, name calling. It should be one where you might be uncomfortable, that person could be uncomfortable. But when the day is over, that discussion's over, you both shake hands, or have a beer, or have age after. And spend time enjoying each other. That's what we're here for in the first place, y'all. The second thing I would say in a college campus, freedom of expression is critical because we all have that right. The beauty of America is that we built our Constitution on just that our First Amendment rights are numbered. And that's because the founding fathers, others decided that it would be in our best interest to have a country. Thoughts and ideas could be expressed proudly. We're about to hit 250 years of America. This is probably the most critical next 12 months that we really seriously turn the page in a way that we all can love, respect, and grow up. As young adults, and as you move on into your lives, it's all right if you do not come. It's all right if you feel a little tense and uptight having this conversation. Matter of fact, you should feel that way. Because divergent thinking is normal. Your thinking process is not wrong. But what you need to know, though, when you make these decisions, that you do it in respect to the other person. Because that other person is a human being, so you're bad. So the critical part of number 3 I have to say is valuing and loving each other. Not talking love in a trivial way. I'm talking about the person you care about, the way that you know they're valuable to society, valuable to the camp, valuable to you all socially. Because that's what we need to do. Connection.
Thank you for all of our panelists. We get a round of applause, please. We'll now be opening up the floor to public forum. 2 microphones, one on each side. If you have any questions, microphone.
Better? There we go. Okay. I know it's a little bit scary to ask the first question, so I figured I would ask a question, kind of get the ball rolling. And if you feel inclined to ask a question while I'm up here, you can either file over there by Quentin, or you can stand behind me and ask a question as soon as I'm finished. So my first question, and this is a question mostly directed towards the professors on the panel, and that is, how does civil dialogue shape the way we learn, specifically in the classroom and on the campus? I'll start with Professor Blake, if you want to answer, and then we can move down to the rest of the professors. Yes. How does civil dialogue shape the way we learn?
That's an easy question to answer. Dialogue you might be arguing over policy. And what you are doing is learning
They don't want to argue.
But the reality is,
You can't really find critical. That's what how
thank you, Professor Love, would you like to weigh in this morning?
Yeah, I think it's really vital. It's incredibly important to, I talked a little bit about why I think gaining this skill of actively listening to what people are saying, even when you disagree with them, but taking seriously what they have to say is really important. That's just the, all right, back off the mic. I think that in my experience in my classes, I find that students sometimes struggle with saying things that they're anxious about whether the rest of the class will agree with what they're saying. It's hard for people, I think, to express an opinion that they don't think is popular. And so often I sort of play the devil's advocate, and even though I know sometimes there are students in the group who are thinking it, but if they won't say it, I'll sort of present opposing perspectives and encourage students to wrestle with that. Because I think it's really vital to reflect on not just what are other perspectives, but what is a reasonable way in which we could respond to somebody who sees the world differently than we do, or has different values than we do, or who asks different questions than the ones that we're primarily interested in. I think that's vital for not only learning what other people think, but also learning what we value and what our thoughts are.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. I see the role of civil dialogue in education as twofold. I think that one thing that education is really good at, in many courses at least, is teaching people how to have civil dialogue. Giving people some skills that allow them to have conversations across difference, and actually move the needles forward with it. That goes beyond merely active listening, which is certainly important. But if you reflect back to me what I say, and I reflect back to you what you say, and no meaningful effort is made to really get down into the dirt with each other and figure out where we agree and where we disagree so that we can solve a problem or seek the truth, I think we're missing out on a great opportunity. So I think that one thing we can do is to learn how to have civil dialogue. But I also think that civil dialogue is not just something we learn how to do, it can be a way that we learn other things. Because I think all learning is active learning. And if you've ever read something and the author makes a claim and you think, how can that be true? And then you wait to see if the author can convince you of it later on. There is that moment of resistance, right? That is essential to really making that knowledge your own. And I think that can happen in classrooms, I think that can happen in dorm rooms, that engaging hard conversations as a way to learn more about what you're talking about. I love it when students come to me and say, I'm not sure I agree with what you said, or why is this argument important? Convince me why I should read more hard. Because that shows they're really grappling with the issues, and in that way they are making knowledge. So I see civil discourse both as something we teach and as a way we learn.
Thank you.
Just had a couple questions, open to the whole panel, whoever would like to answer, no one in particular. So would you say that promoting civil dialogue, the act itself, is more of a preventative measure, like preventing dialogue from turning uncivil, or a proactive measure, keeping and supporting that?
I don't think it's preventative at all. I think it's supportive. It's about trying to provide a common understanding.
understood as being polite. And so the best way that I can be polite is just sort of nod and internally disagree with you, but we leave, then either one of us understands the other person better, but at least we weren't fighting, right? I prefer the concept of productive dialogue, where we are trying to produce something together, whether that is mutual understanding or seeking the truth or a solution to the problem. And I think that civil dialogue, at its best, means productive dialogue. And in that sense, I would say it's definitely proactive. It's designed to try to do something.
How would each of you tackle the issue of dialogue evolving into being uncivil or unproductive?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, you turn on cable news and all it is eight talking heads on your TV screen who are screaming at each other. Not exactly productive, and not necessarily give you some time. Obviously, being in the legislature, we deal with some very contentious issues. And there are no shortage of conflict on that. So you will say the wacky, craziest thing because it's going to give them a commercial license, social media, or a put on a conclusion. I always try to operate in a way when I get out there with the legislation. I don't take things personal. There are moments and days that it's tough, but try to keep it policy centered, try to keep it focused on the issue at hand. And even as someone who, as the Senate President Pro Tem, sometimes I have to oversee our floor sessions. And there are nights when things get very heated, and sometimes we have to leave the phone. And I think, by and large, I work on legislation and we're having maybe our respective houses and offices. Asking about as was just brought up when during a class. I reached out. My door is open. I understood. I mean, but very rarely. I don't. I personally don't ask. I don't. Sleep. Yeah. Why is it that government something's been lost? I'm not going to. Right. Finally, like, when did it get to the point? When did it find the that's what I'm struggling.
I'm down in Madison. I also don't go down to where they are on the and they don't know. Just take time. Find it. Oh, but my goal is but people who are really compromised actually urgent forward strike. Find those their values, policy.
Would you say that civil dialogue is preventative or sorry, what is the correct course of action if dialogue becomes
so I would offer a few ideas from student affairs. I work here in the university. How many of you live in a residence hall? How many of you know and agree with that? Right? So, joy being hired out of residence hall. Idea is have adults who are eager to learn or are interested in learning, living together in a common housing by residence hall. See how these okay, so we have organization students wanting to come together around common doesn't have a third of all. They think they're fully that they never have never. So all of those all of those and they safe place. Safe sometimes like others and we try to provide or adults and in a way that someone will get better quality that is what dining employees another thing. Other than that, like okay, so yeah. That's very sometimes
Just a question about like I used to teach Madison. I say there's some example. This
people on the right sit on the right. People on the right argue for equal amount, and especially public campuses should try to ensure that their spaces are equal. I'm not talking about administrators giving, specific lessons. It is every formation out. People on the left are not trying to get that. For now, in the different area, people on the right are trying to get that. And it just is an article really interesting because it basically says both sides now have a center to refer back to basic fundamental person benefit. And that's the only thing that is sort of fight the shift. Otherwise, we're sort of stuck in this era where those on the left and those on the right are actively trying to stop each other from talking. And that's not what works. Frankly, I don't know.
This is, this is for anyone that would like to answer. I'm curious about how free speech should be interpreted and used on social media, especially for someone who is my age, which is 21. How to engage with that because there's a lot of people going on. I'm just curious.
That's a great question. And so I think one of the things I have really spoken to how I dealt with this multiple different ways. I think kind of my mind back to previous conversations that we had. It is, I think, a big key to this dialogue is coming at it from a respectful and listening perspective. And I think that comes from yourself too, as a person who's engaging in this. If you are not in a in a space where you feel like you can effectively communicate, then you need to separate yourself from that. So I think some people, what they've done is they have really deleted certain social media platforms, whether that's X or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, depending on the type of political discourse or dialogue that's happening on here. And then you see resurging events like this guy that kind of more of a, I would say, left-leaning ideology where it's more, I would say, you don't see a lot of discourse on there, but there's definitely political messaging on there. And so I think my perspective on it is really you're reflecting on yourself because you communicate on whatever social media platform you are engaging with. Do you feel like it's beneficial for yourself or your mental health? Do you feel like you're making an impact? Or is it something that is stressing you out? I know myself personally, I recently deleted Facebook because I felt like I wasn't getting out of it. Feeling myself and I didn't feel like I was making a difference in any way. Not to say that social media can be used to help promote that, we have to take a look at yourself and your engagement.
Roughly leading the students with a college Zach chat group, either it's be 2028 or 2029. Variable style set in those spaces, so every kind of probably get out. It's too conscious to back out of this space.
And just to add, I mean, especially what we were doing, okay. I mean, when I was going to school here, I graduated in fall of 2011. I mean, Facebook was relatively new when I first came to SGA. One that, and I did do a lot of scrubbing from my friends said, well, you're of course definitely not going to speak my friends. But it is definitely something that can come, and I think it's actually an excellent point that people can contribute productively to a conversation. I'd say, obviously, as elected officials, we use it to communicate with people at all times. It's, I call it better than anything. Keyboard warriors that no matter what you do, I work to control you. I try and do our communications productive with individuals that are shut in my office because, and the other thing, I think it's problematic as our culture as a whole. Social media has allowed everyone everyone within the technical chain. You combine individuals who share the same computers, same worldview, same political views, you name it. And it makes it very easy for individuals to isolate anyone with different opinions, which, you know, I don't know what the right answer to this. Obviously, you have to take it with what's best for you. But personally, I don't engage in social media anymore. I do it for my campaign, in my legislative office, at least personally. I'm off.
I just want to talk about that real quick. What everyone just said about social media, because I have a story that's kind of a counterexample, like a positive possibility of social media. A couple of years ago, you may remember there was a global pandemic, and I was on Facebook, and one of the things I discovered was that there were a lot of anti-masking Facebook pages. And it got me really curious because when I thought about it, I couldn't actually, like when I forced myself to think about it, I couldn't think of a reason not to wear a mask in public, but I literally couldn't find one. So I joined every anti-masking Facebook page I could find. There were 30 of them. My whole Facebook feed was just anti-masking stuff for weeks. And for several weeks I just read them, and because I genuinely wanted to see what would people whose impulses were completely opposite to mine, what would their worldview be? What would their perspective be? And so for a while I just read their perspectives. And then after a couple of weeks I would say, what do you all think about this? Or what do you all think about that? Just to see what would they do with counter arguments and counter examples. And I found it so a lot of people were talking about the dangers of social media, so I thought this might be a good counter example. I found it incredibly useful. It's not that I read all these pages and brainwashed and changed my mind, but what I did find is that some of the things these people were concerned about were reasonable things to be concerned about, right? They were asking questions about government overreach, and that is a reasonable thing to wonder about. Whether I think this was an example of it, it was something that it was like a value that people in these groups shared that I thought, this question worth asking, that they were wondering. The other thing they really worried about was the effect this was happening on children in school. And it turned out what the data has shown is it really did have a negative effect on students in school. And so they were the first people whom I saw were worried about this in real time as it was happening. And so I found that really useful. When they found out that I wasn't an master, a lot of people began in this group. So they didn't have the same value of your everything. And they actually said to me, why are you in this group if you are anti-mask? And then for everyone who asked me that, I was right. I'm very interested in people of different perspectives than they do. They don't even ask that. You have been kicked out of Minnesota anti-masking. But a couple of them let me stay in, and I just found the experience really useful. So I'm sure that just to say, it is definitely the case that a lot of social media is toxic and can be really frustrating. What I find really frustrating about social media is there are opportunities to use it to actually engage with people, but we just don't. We're not very good at that. We don't do the thing that I think social media would actually be best at doing, which is getting us to engage in dialogue with people who do things differently than us and really wrestle with that. What we actually do is just group up with people who think exactly the same as us. And so I just wanted to make a plea for try that. Try to join a group that has different perspectives or politics than they do. And it kind of feels like a good challenge. Like you get to kind of feel like what's it like to fit in something that can feel uncomfortable, but it's not going to ruin you. It's not, you're not going to be harmed. You're very likely to change your perspective. But you could learn something about it before you might use it. So that's my plea for a positive value in social media.
All right, going back to the First Amendment rights and your right to assembly, what do you guys believe that, when it comes to protests, when do protests become riots, and when is it to the government's job to stop protests?
then act like an action project that they would like to share. So we had a right over all together on the front lawn of the campus. We had an anti-gambling policy. I talked to the students, we talked to the university police, we talked with the university leadership. We came to an agreement on a law that needed to be in place. So we didn't have it like harder into perception, like how can we as a university help you use the student for safe for the business. In terms of anecdotes to a college, I mean, there are rules in place around public safety. So if a group of humans are all occupying Fourth Avenue, where cars are starting to drive, that in and of itself is a safety issue, and a legal issue. It's a conversation I think I and Rob would like to have to go, which is your goal, how the government find a place in a way to achieve your goal. Here's why it's a place that's very difficult. And you can be heard, being overstate, having not being overly disruptive. And that's the thing, is what I'm talking about. That one of the things that we talk a lot about in the academic freedom community mission about and in our office is that because we are a university, our goal is to be educators, and we can't let disruption activities get in the way of us being able to educate our students. So there are people marching right next to CDP and passes on messaging. Those are people not going to stop, because those students have a right to their education. So we have to use those programming. So how do we help them find a space to do that?
So, I think what's going on before, let me just say this, how many times is this. The goal of the protest or what we have is all education. So, I have a goal with all the people who are organizing it, talking to times, talking about happening in our groups that are here, how we not always going to play what the Chinese means that they're not smart, they're not smart. Here's the reality. You're always going to be vulnerable to something that's out here. One way they have that over there. Law enforcement is not going to be able to do it. And we don't plan things. We try to work with everything and stuff the way. The most important part of this whole discussion is it might start off, those of us involved keep it very calm. Last thing we want is folks who are trying to hide it down. We don't want us to be trying to do this. We work very close to organizing. Women inside, everything's set up, like A through B. Again, we have that's all flavor. Very clear.
Molly mentioned earlier, talking about free speech, truth doesn't actually, facts don't actually matter. Truth doesn't, lie all you want, still covered under free speech. Dissenting voices, as long as they're not considered a true threat, free speech. And very often, colleagues will say the best thing to do when you don't like the speech is enter the work speech. Engage in conversation and dialogue. Try to get to an understanding of why people think this. Someone else.
Other than one thing, as criminal court and especially Supreme Court, and practically speech law, the equity of the veto always comes. The equity of the veto is part of that. I'm giving a speech, you stand up, you start shouting down, I sort of see talking as a mistake, taking water bottle and erasing someone off that is the equivalent of handling. There are no cases that I'm aware of really in public art, but the reason judges frown upon that equity veto, and frankly, everyone engaged in free speech rights will frown on that equity veto, is because it interrupts your ability to present your message to the public. And in the free marketplace, you ask that, you have the First Amendment right to question it, as does the other person. So you have a choice. Point, I'm sure university policy is focused on that. And I just see posters on the UC debate trying to destroy a message, which would be the equivalent of equity veto. And we should not be acting like that against other speakers, especially those in this group. Because frankly, if I exercise an equity veto and I get away with it, somebody else is going to do the same thing to me. So we need to reach kind of, international relations to accommodate conflict. That sort of in my agreement that we're not going to interrupt that means against fighting again. Not watching someone conflict stop. Even if I'm watching the message is true.
And just to piggyback on that, see somebody dumping the water bottle on somebody's testimony, whether you agree with that message or not, you use the bottle to call that person out as respectfully and say, look, I'm not pro this or that, I can't do this or that, but I do believe that there's not a person in the fight here, and he's not the technical man. That's really important like you to engage. Well, that only works. I don't know, but that's nothing wrong with it, and you have to be the person who's willing to stand up. What is right rather than the idea itself. That idea getting that persevering, fighting all values system, and that is the person that is. So that's it up.
Joy's recommendation comes after the conversation with individual students how to be hostile face to them. Like they try to engage in conversation in the space, acceptable conversation, by encouraging others to join in on better behavior in that space. Engage. So for their own wellness, recommend an option as an adult saying to speak up. So thankfully, most often in Snapchat groups, there are so many best messages to move on. I'm in every one of them, so I see all of the messages.
could just interject a little bit about social media. Social media is a fascinating place, like Sean, I see a lot of possible good in it. But it does, of course, have a tendency to elevate the end members, right? Because the algorithm feeds us the most extreme positions. And so it can lead us to, I think, adopt a slightly more pessimistic view of human nature than we might. And also, although my natural inclination is to want to engage respectfully. I don't know how the algorithms work, but I also know, I think I know, and I might be wrong, that if I respond to what I consider to be the most noxious messages, I attend to them and I elevate, right? So I try to engage with what I consider to be positive content and not engage with what I consider to be toxic. Simply because I know downstream effects of engagement, even if I want it to be positive, right? Hoping in the grand scheme of things. But I very much take it. I don't want to absent myself in spaces either, because then the cesspool wins.
Greatly appreciate that you guys all kind of here, especially in the age of our society where this kind of thing is squashed a lot. There's just not more information. I got a couple tough questions. First is about political correctness, controversy, and sensitivity. I think it's a large issue, especially in data information, because we're having disagreements across the aisle. That there are a lot of topics that can be controversial, that you need to correct. Of course, you have a sort of kind approach that is kind of created with Professor Warren earlier. Stability is not it's honestly, I think the most kind video is that it's being honest and very multi-person. And I would like to know what your guys' opinion is on the idea that so many ideas and topics have been controversial or need an error of correctness or maybe sensitive. And if you were to change that, how would you go about it? Implement that change in your own minds for you to use and follow that example.
I personally, for a little bit of background information, I did for our academic policy. I am looking at the former MSP vice president, I've been looking at the company, being volunteer now working at the university. A committee that has a lot of things, especially around the primary value, like that, I completely agree with what you're saying, that stability, technology, everything we necessarily talk about. Where I have the line is not crossing the line of being personal, but the fact that it's personal, something that makes up their core identity, or that's their race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, anything like that. That, in my opinion, those conversations tend to de-escalate tension, and then once tension is escalated, then it's hard to have these switch dialogue, and then now you're not talking about topics like political correctness or I'm addressing core values. And so I don't know if this is addressing my policy personally, making sure that I have these kind of conversations, not to cross that line and make it personal, and to make sure that if the person is over that line or having problems with that line, let them know respectfully if they're foreign gay, hey, you're not cool, I can see why the person has tried to be my defense of what they're saying, but I have a little bit more to express that they get that's
I appreciate that question. Thinking out those words myself. You have to be really honest, I think, with the person and not presenting. But if you're earlier and you're kind of overplayed, you still got to be kind about it, right? You can be I realize that that's hard for a certain generation of people. I grew up doing construction job sites where different races and ethnicities, slander was thrown around about that, as a crew of, my seniors would just say things like they thought they shouldn't have said because that's how they grew up doing it. I told myself as a construction professional that I would never allow that on my job sites. And that's how you have to live. You have to live in the back of those all times, right? You can be blunt, you can be to the point, but you have to be kind. And if you're offending somebody, you have to look at yourself at the end of the day. And you take that home with you. I take it hard. If I piss somebody off, I always try to make it right. So I think you have to be true to yourself, but just always be mindful about the people who are what you're saying is actually messing up. It's really simple. It's so simple for you to be nice to others. So simple. It's so simple to be respectful when you ask a question. It's so simple to just have a fruitful dialogue with somebody and not make an intention. I think that's one thing I heard down here is just keep to the policy, keep to the point, and never make a personal attack. And once you do that, you lose. You lose argument, you lose your credibility, you lose respect for the other person. And I'm not saying it's always easy. Sometimes people might go after them, but gotta take that high road, even though the road is getting lower and lower and lower every single day out there. Gotta do the best to take it to the high level.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you believe that there needs to be kindness, no matter what that is. God, when it comes to further question here specifically, would you how would you define kindness and why is it more important to be kind than it is to make sure you will be kind?
You can always be honest and kind. It takes you make nothing to be nice, right?
Right.
I mean, if you want, you have to make a choice. You want to be right, or you want to be kind, right? And there's two very different things. You can be right and be happy if you're kind. If you're, like I said earlier, you've got to be happy at the end of the day. You will always pay for that. Getting that from that, you guys are maybe in 50 years.
But I also think that I agree with that. It's not personally attractive when you based off of an aspect of who they are. That's not really part of the conversation. But I think most of the community is when it comes to day, ideas themselves cannot what you need trying to do it. That is the inevitability of our DNA. And I would might not agree with that, but I've argued pretty clearly that that is very, very true. And again, I have many people might be offended by that form of kindness. It's probably speculating for kindness. But he said you not just uphold everybody's values and ideals, you really want to get your hand off and see this proof that it's you, or what you perceive as that's more than you like kindness.
I think maybe depends on what we mean by kindness. I certainly can't affect how people are affected. I can't turn out people like that, what I say. And this is the thing that makes deep, meaningful conversation across difference hard. And I think you put your finger exactly on it. That there are some conclusions that people will take personally because they are personal. I think there are some religious leaders
somebody to show up, you know, one of those awkward situations, this speech is not really but there's so much to hear on board every way you go. Someone's always throwing bombs or they're attacking somebody or saying something crazy to get headlines. And she's like, I know, I can't believe people attack. And we walked down into the assembly floor, and no kidding, she was the next person to speak. She stood up. I didn't even know who that person was. It was the most beautiful piece of theater I've ever seen. Just pulling out crazy national ideas about others on the other side of the aisle, how we're such bad people. Yet, you're second to the we just had this really, really production meeting up there. It's all together that I thought this is what so, I don't know what to do. Maybe you should run for office. So I think you just have to model the behavior. You can clean out the room, take time, just get people on the level. That's just skill set, embrace it. It's not easy. Walk out and work out.
From a little bit before, because I was very curious what it meant by it. My idea on it is that, especially that remarkable idea of an emphasize speaker, listen, I'm like a little confused. I would say that a speaker is a targeted audience. They're trying to garner followers or get to an idea. They're trying to make an argument that's representable and I say followers. So they're targeted audience, like what they are going for an audience, like a speaker that makes you feel like emphasized and not maybe listeners. And your listeners are really critically analyze what the speaker is saying and they need justice for itself. Judgment for itself. I also, in many of my classes, are trying to get this, especially in the main classes, that's important. They emphasize that it's kind of listener's responsibility to analyze what you are being told. Just listen, but try to understand it and not just believe it. Exactly. I was a little curious.
So to be clear, what I said first amendment, I never recognize the speaker is the text of life. First amendment protects your right to speak, your right to associate, your right to believe whatever it is you want to believe more than that, and your right to be part of government partnership. Those are individual rights that are there in you, and David's argument they are both, and they indicate that we are autonomous individuals. The First Amendment protects the speaker's right to speak. It says nothing about the business or life. So if you don't speak on your own and speak when no one's there, you have that right. If you want to talk to other people in the room, you do. They don't have to listen to you. They can't judge you. But what you're talking about as far as the listener goes is how you process
one reason or another, they feel comfortable talking about some of these important issues. And again, trying to find that balance because I think there's one specific question I see. That's one thing that I think I concern that they express an opinion that is counter to the opinions that they believe their professor has, that they're less likely to share, and which is unfortunate because for that, the professor likely to find this is about three positive ideas, and we should feel that people challenge each other on some very important topics because that's the only way we grow as a society. Which is why there's more work being done in this one. Also reports goes to you what are regions where there are incidents that violate a group or organization's free speech. In fact, we had a incident just a couple of years ago where a student organization in this very building had their posters vandalized, and that's a very nice not movie around. Bashed the home, all the Nazis, and obviously that's the concern. And there are rules and regulations put in place that allow those degrees in the air and to go through the process of disciplinary conduct when people that the rights are violated. And more importantly, that's why there's such a huge emphasis in the leadership under President Obama and our regions to ensure that there is such a need against people are universities, reading diverse thought and all. And it doesn't mean you have to agree. And it doesn't mean we're going to walk out of your hand and become the friends. But we should have that opportunity to students don't do what they can.
Yeah, I echo a lot of that. I think a lot of the onus is also, you said it, marketing authority, you're not to be your professors and be worried about having unpopular opinion. I think that's a fair assessment of how some students may feel. I think that if professors are doing their jobs as educators, whether or not you have an unpopular opinion, I should come up then with the earnest idea to say, like, hey, I disagree with you. I would like to write on this topic. They should be rating you on the merits of your argument, not on whether they believe it's true or false, right? So the onus is on us. I guess when I was back in to ask tough questions, to talk to your professors, to say exactly that. You know, how do you know if your thought process, argument is good unless you actually ask the people who are here to teach you? That's an important part of it. That's how we actually have a free speech and open dialogue. Free parties to be convincing your peers, right? Because you're probably going to be a minority if you have whatever popular opinion you have. I remember the same guy. I remember you in college, another guy who called me a godless student. He was in our class, student. That's amazing. But we respected each other at the end of the day. That was a very funny slight, which I laughed off. And at the end of the day, we were still challenging each other about our views on things. But I think that really relying on the students to take their own education in their own hands. Now, you the professors.
I can just add to that. I don't remember anybody calling me about speaking of my class. I think I would remember that. But I'm not saying I didn't have to. Might have been it.
like vigil to honor someone who died, and you start telling people, I think the person that died is a jerk, I'm not sure that that's the place to assume that civil dialogue is appropriate. I mean, that's not why people have gathered. I think there's a difference between going to a space where people have gathered for the context of engaging in dialogue versus context in which people have gathered to support or agree with one another. And so if you're in a space where everyone is there just to confirm each other's beliefs, then I'm not sure that's actually a place where like dialogue or differences, I'm not sure that's the right place to seek for that kind of conversation. And so if you're, for students who are interested, because both of you I think are asking similar kinds of questions, if you're interested in finding the space where you can say unpopular opinions publicly or engage dialogue, if you're not finding them on campus, then my feedback to you is create a space like that on campus. Right? It's not hard to create a student organization or go on social media and say, I would like to debate this topic respectfully. Is there anyone who would like to do it? I promise you will find someone to do it. If you can't find anybody, email me. I will happily debate you for fun on the topic. I wonder if I could make a living just doing that. That's my feedback or thought about that. Is I think those spaces can exist. I think you have to know what space you're in and think about what is the purpose of the space and is it reasonable to assume that civil dialogue is going to be a value in this space? It's related to what you were saying about the classroom versus academic space, or certain class group spaces versus like other spaces.
Going back to your point about how and you did put out the survey, yes, I put it out. Part of it is there is a big question. It's very robust in knowledge and students, but I'm very good. So it's not as robust. But the question in here that asks, if your instructor says something that you or other students think is far from something far as a student, should you report that instructor to the minister? Only 45% of students said absolutely. Maybe 75% possibly were on science scale from probably to absolutely. When I first saw that, I thought that's right. I don't want to be reported. Yes, but their family with the photos were scared, but they don't want to get it. But then I thought, well, that's probably sufficient. What that is, I don't know. But it shows that like the entire the majority of students, if they hear something that they think are another student or student, they should ask the administrators to review it. They can, they can go to the board and ask the authority to the authority. Now that doesn't happen as far as I'm aware. But it shows there's some kind of this approach here without students receiving what they hear and maybe what they are. Beyond that, I don't know where it goes other than estimating data and
Students do.
okay.
I mean, not because developmental consulting is checking kinds of campus climate or classroom environment. Students come and we, in various ways, we use student office or we or to chance with we grade those, we have discussions with students, we meet with faculty in the evening, but I think that's part of the checking council we have any years, not just student. So someone that, like 75% have range. I think those that take deeply discerning if there's a repetitive behavior or something that's seen as being usually dialogue. Once again, I think just as the base form is that dialogue solves a lot, quite a high percent. And if you have that kind of dialogue feedback with the students or students feedback to the student, usually it's pretty much easy.
It takes some time for other people to put decisions. Like Vice President Alvey
Thank you everybody for showing up. I want to say a special thank you to Mr. Curtis and Daniel Bechtel for everything that also deserves to work in this case, so thank you for that. I also want to thank everybody that showed up and asked important questions, because there are a lot of great questions from here to here. I was talking to Representative Mesky, and he had mentioned how hard it is to get people to come to town halls, and I understand that, so I really appreciate everybody that showed up. And then I also just want to say, we give the panelists a round of applause. Means a lot that you guys are willing to talk to the campus community and the community as a whole about civil dialogue and values that are shared as Americans. I want to point out a couple things before we close. One thing is that everybody is speaking with the American Life Environment and talking about upholding the American value of civil dialogue, and I think that's important. And I think the flip side of that is we're also speaking part of Wisconsin, like we're all talking about the value of sharing food, like I think that's great. I would say everybody in this community, my call to action for you guys is if you disagree and you're 21, we'll share a beer with each other and talk about anything. Find what we disagree on, talk about it. And then lastly, I want to close with a quote that I really like about civil dialogue that I think is very important. It's a very famous quote, very simple, but I think it's powerful. It's by the French philosopher Voltaire, and it is, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend it to the death, the right to say it. And I think it's powerful. Right now, we're in a time